Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's 4 o'clock and this is Elaine Godley and you're listening to Perfect Health on Elastic FM with me, Elaine Godley. And today in the studio, we've got the lovely Jackie Wilson from Empower Education. Let's start off the show today with a lovely, lovely song, Best Day of My Life. And we'll be with Jackie very shortly. And we are Jackie Wilson and Elaine Godley. So, Jackie, your company is called Empower Education. So, what does Empower Education do?
So, well, our passion really is about empowering and inspiring the next generation to thrive and the ecosystem around them. So whether that's parents, whether that's educators, people who work with children, it's the whole child approach.
Okay, so what age are we talking about?
Well, for me, it can be right from early years. The work that we do, I mean, Empower Education is also, there's a collaboration with Emotions Toolkit that I'm involved with as well, which starts at 3. And that goes up to, at the moment, about 11. So, yeah, we can work with children from 3 right through to adults.
Okay, and when you say adults, I mean, I'm 62 now. Would I qualify?
Well, you're a granny, aren't you?
I am a granny, yes, a few times over.
Yeah, it's a whole child approach. So, yeah, it could be anybody that is around young people. That's my passion. I can work with anybody. I could work with any adult. But for me, it's the next generation and the people around them.
Okay, so when you say an emotions toolkit, what do you mean by emotions? Because there's lots of fake news, if you like, about emotions and what we should do about emotions. What are they, in fact? You know, some people don't recognise that the way they behave actually is as a result of their emotional reaction to an event.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. You know, there's so many big mental health statistics out there at the moment, particularly for the teenage arena. And for me, you know, emotions are a aspect of the thought process. So we have these thoughts, this kind of inner critic that can be there sometimes that can affect how we feel. It can kind of bring us into that place of not feeling great or feeling amazing, depending on what our thought process is. So for the early years, my passion is to actually educate them how to navigate how they feel. So at a young age, in the moment, what can they do if they're starting to feel a little bit cross because they can't have something, if their parents said no, for example. So there are tools that, as I say, start from 3 years old that are really simple. Mindfulness, they're yoga breathing techniques, in the moment tools that anybody can use. It can be an adult because they're adult breathing techniques as well. Yeah. For example, there's a tool called Take 5. So that's literally tracing your hand with one finger. And so you've got the element of touch, which is slightly distracting to be able to bring your emotional state down a little bit, so that children can learn to bring themselves into a state of calm so they can talk about how they feel rather than express it in an angrily way. You know, all these emotions we always teach are okay. They're all okay to feel because they're all messages. But if we're going to end up hitting somebody or shouting or doing something unkind, that's not the way to be in the world. We can have those emotions and we can actually tell somebody that we're feeling angry rather than expressing that in an unkind way. So it's teaching children how to understand their emotions. So we do things like flashcards with younger children so that they can recognize what they're feeling, whether it's through the body, in their face, in the movements that they make. They can recognize that and then have tools to know what to do to stop them going into crisis, because that's when they can't control, when they've flipped their lid and they can't control. So when they get to around about 7, we teach them about the brain and how the brain works, so they understand we've got a fight and flight response and it's normal and natural to protect us from being eaten, really. You know, if when we were back in the caveman days, we needed to get away from lions and bears, and it's a normal response to be worried. It's normal. And so once they understand that, they then understand that they have another part of the brain that they can develop neural pathways to be able to calm that reptilian part of their brain, the fight flight, because they're not in a dangerous situation. If it's an exam, for example, or it's a teacher or a parent that's asking them to do something, it's not dangerous. I mean, there obviously are dangerous situations, but for the most part of the time, we're not in a dangerous situation. So let's bring ourselves into a state of calm and talk more assertively and calmly and balanced to get our point across, so that we can express how we feel in a way that's not damaging to ourselves or others.
Interesting. I was going to ask you, how would you begin to explain to a 3-year-old about feelings? Because all the words we use as an adult, neuro pathways and feelings and emotions and all the rest of it, they're big long words, with huge meanings.
Yeah.
So for a 3-year-old, you've mentioned flashcards.
Yeah. So we have flashcards, and we use stones as well. We have a stone toolkit. So there's faces on there, and what we can do is show them the card, ask them to make the face, and say, what feeling is this? So we're starting to encourage them to help us, and if they don't know, we'll say, this is an angry feeling, this is what anger looks like, so that they can start to understand that when their body's tense, when their face is a certain way, that's the sort of feeling, because they can make those faces themselves and start to recognize them. So it's a process of them starting to have a go at feeling into an emotion and then being able to know what to do with it. So we don't really, until they're about 7, we don't really teach them about the brain. There is a very simple way to teach the brain, which a guy called Daniel Siegel taught, which came up with, should I say, which is the hand-brain model. And so we can teach about the reptile is the palm of the hand, the thumb is your mammal part of your brain, and the fingers, as they curl over your thumb, if your thumb is on your palm, is your human brain. And that is the part of where self-control is. So when our little reptile part of our brain is panicking or angry or worried about something, we can flip our lid. So the human brain flips up and it has no control at all. So what we teach children to do is to be able to curl our fingers over our thumb and our palm to kind of hug and manage the lower parts of the brain. So it's a very simple way, and it's a very effective way, actually, because kids are doing this all the time when we teach them. But I don't really teach at 3, 4, 5. They're too young. It's teaching through story. So what we do is we have a fun story we teach them, which is about Jack and Jane going on a little journey, just going out for the day into the countryside. And Jane falls down, she gets upset, and the little bunny hops out, which is a breathing technique, a yoga breathing technique, to help her calm down and teach her a tool to calm herself down, which she does. And they're both surprised that Jack couldn't calm her down, but she's calm now because she's just tried this breathing technique. And then they carry on. Jack gets scared of a bee, and then Bunny says, just stop and listen to the sound of the bee, which is another yoga breathing technique. So they hum, and the humming sound, they can really feel the calm. And when you do that with children actively, you can see that they're active 1 minute and then they're doing a breathing technique the next. And this has been witnessed obviously by teachers, and they're so amazed that children, they can feel, it's like tangible. They can feel the calm in the room with 3-year-olds, 3 and 4-year-olds. And so once they experientially understand those tools, they do want to use them. At 3 and 4, they're going home and telling their parents to do all these tools. So it does work, and it's literally teaching them how to recognise an emotion and to know what to do if you're not feeling great. And even if you're too excited, how to calm yourself down as well.
It sounds brilliant. I mean, Bunny's hopping out and being frightened of a bee and all this sort of thing. That's actually grown up the world, isn't it? It's not just a kiddie's world; it happens in the grown up world.
Absolutely.
So how did you know about these stories? Are these stories you've made up yourself, or have you had training in the specific field?
So I have a partnership with a lovely lady called Deborah Webster, who is an ex-primary teacher. Used to work in early years, and she's an artist as well. So she's done all the wonderful artwork for what we've got. And so we sort of came up with an idea about the story, and I got all the tools that I use, and I talked to her about could she create me a toolkit. We've ended up going into business together, which is amazing. And so she's a bit more great at storytelling and writing. I mean, I've been teaching yoga to kids for about 17 years and storytelling through yoga, but she obviously was in schools with the reading aspects, the literacy aspects, so she created a rhyming story around that. We came up with the concept, so it wasn't all me.
Right. That's the C word. Very often people, and I'm not talking Christmas here, but a lot of people in business, it's all about competition. The biggest, the best, the
Yes.
fastest, whatever it is. Collaboration to me is just vital. And I have been in business several times with some fantastic results and also some disastrous. So to me, it's the collabing together of the minds, which can then be greater than the sum of the parts, as it were, which is what you've clearly done with Deborah. So what does the emotions toolkit look like? You've described the story and the rhyming. You've mentioned she's an artist. So is there a book? Is it cards? How does it
there's
look?
a resource pack. So we have a family pack, we have a early years and key stage 1 pack, so that goes up to about 7 years old. We have a junior resource as well, and then in January we're going to be creating a teen resource. So the early years and key stage 1, that's based around the story, so the children can actively do it, and so they can learn the tools through actively acting out the story, or they can do it in circle time or in one-to-one. They can do it, and then the teacher or the parent will have the explanation of how to do each tool, and any discussions you might like to have with your children, so that they can start to progress those tools and practice them on a daily basis. So we always recommend for schools or preschools or day nurseries to practice them first thing in the morning when the children arrive, or before you go to school, maybe after break time, after lunch time, because when the children have been out and about and running around, they're not settled, they might have had a fallout, but just taking 30 seconds to a minute to do one tool is very effective to bring children back ready to learn. For the juniors, we didn't have a toolkit, so what I did this year was work with some resilience leaders at a junior school, and I taught them the younger kit. And what I then encouraged them to do was to feedback of what they felt worked. So they went away and tested it in their own lives, at school, at home. They came back and some of them had found it really worked for them. Some of them hadn't tried. But over time, they all started to do it. And so I said to them, okay, so what do you feel is really effective that would really work for other junior age children? So they fed that back, and then I asked them for other ideas. So we sat with them, and they came up with an absolute array of amazing ideas and activities. And they helped create the junior toolkit. So there are 4 tools in the junior toolkit that were created by the children. And I don't know where they got them from, but they've come up with some tools that are very mindfulness based, and they made them up like the butterfly, imagining a place that you would love to be that makes you feel calm and happy. So anybody can imagine anything. It could be a mountain top, it could be a beach, it could be your own bedroom. And then imagine yourself as a butterfly, just flying to that place gently and then landing and resting in that place. Another one's a feather, where you imagine a feather on your hand, you put your emotions into your feather, and then you take a deep breath and blow them away. So it's the process of letting go, recognising the emotion and letting it go, rather than being affected by it. It's that slight detachment, so it doesn't have the power over you, but not ignoring it. So you can see that it's there, but you're not getting affected, like we say, with being unkind to people or unkind to yourself. So that's the junior toolkit. And they very much said that they wanted all junior children to learn about the brain and the mind and how to navigate it. So we have information in there that teachers can do to teach the children about the brain in a very simple way. We use animals and a superhero for the human part of the brain, so they can step into their superhero power of being able to self-control and navigate through it.
It's brilliant. It sounds absolutely fascinating. And as you say, we're not taught this stuff at school traditionally. It's not on the syllabus as such, especially not for so young. So hopefully, as you say, we're going to get a new breed, a new generation. But where do you do this, Jackie? I know you live in the East Midlands.
Yeah.
Is it just East Midlands at the moment, or do you go nationwide?
Yeah, totally go nationwide, working in Coventry in November, December, January. So they're going to be doing it down there. So yes, we've only really launched it a few months ago, so it's still early days, but we are getting a lot of interest. Done presentations at different conferences, and a lot of the school staff that we're speaking to are just blown away of how simple this resource is, and that's what we wanted, was a resource that was so simple that everybody can access it. And as I said, this resource is for children, but actually we always encourage teachers through teacher training and parents to also use them. We have a activity in the book which is a self-management plan, so you actually think about your emotion and what tool you're going to use next time you feel it, so that we have a go-to. Because for me, when I see people in emotional states, they don't normally know what to do with it. So if they've in their mind already decided that next time I feel angry, I'm going to do the feather, and then they've got it as a go-to, and they can also be reminded of it. So peers can remind each other, what was your tool, etc. And we have things like, for schools we have key rings, so each tool is on a key ring, and so teachers can have it on lanyards for quick access. And then we also have the stones, the physical stones with the tools on, so they're really good for working one-to-one, particularly with special needs children, because they're very tactile and they can connect with the tools a lot easier by holding them. But you wouldn't give a child a stone when they're in crisis, so that's why we have the key ring as the other way to be able to use them.
Right, great ideas. You mentioned earlier on that when children come in from playing, they're all over the place and they need to settle, and it's a good way for, with a story to settle them down, and then that can help with the emotions. I used to work in schools years and years ago as an external consultant, and I found that whenever the weather was turbulent, particularly a windy day, and if the moon was in, if like a new moon, I mean, it sounds a bit weird and peculiar, but it was just so, every school that I was in, they said exactly the same thing. If it was a windy day and if it was a new moon, duck, because it's going to be a really difficult day.
Absolutely. So, and when it's rain, when they're kept in all the time as well.
Yeah, they go stir crazy, don't they? So I think it's a great idea having these very simple and quick, aren't they? They're very short stories, very simple, quick, and most people can conjure up the picture of the butterfly and the calming atmosphere and so on, and the little bunny hopping and so on and so forth.
Well, the mind's powerful, and so when you imagine something, the mind believes it to be true most of the time. So if you're imagining blowing a feather, your mind thinks you're blowing your emotions away, and it allows you to let go. And that's what's so powerful about it. Kids' imagination matched with a simple tool, it works wonders.
Fantastic. I learnt years ago from the great Bob Proctor, who I trained with, and about thinking in pictures. And a doctor, 1934, Dr. Truman Fleet, an American, of course, who came up with the concept of the stick person. So you imagine a stick person. So you've got the circle for the head, circle for the body, and then sticky arms and legs. So when you have your head of the stick person, if you have a line drawn across the middle, so effectively that's our point of our nose. So you draw a line across there. The top half of the stick person's head is the conscious mind, and the lower part of the head is the unconscious mind. And then the body in there would be the actions. So whatever you're thinking, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, then will translate into actions. And then there was a line drawing out from the stick person, which is the results. So basically, if the results aren't what you want, it's because the actions you took were inappropriate based upon the thoughts. And as we know, the thoughts and feelings and actions are all connected. So whatever tools you use, it's really important to keep on kind of revising them, keep on looking at them, so that, as you say, when a child has a reaction of some sort, having something that they can hold on to, whether it's in the mind or physically holding on to, is really, really powerful.
And we always suggest that they practice it when they're calm, so they're practicing all these tools to learn them, so they drop into the subconscious, they're there, they're embedded, so that then when anything happens, it's ezy to access a lot.
They automatically know what to do because they've been practicing it and visualising it, haven't they?
Precisely.
Like the old what's his name, Cassius Clay, that was Muhammad Ali, fake it till you make it, I'm the champion, and then one day he was the champion.
That's it.
Amazing. So let's have a bit of music. What should we have here? If I can get my gizmo here to work, let's have a bit of Jason Derulo. We were talking about things in our head. This is In My Head, Jason Derulo. So there we go, Jason Derulo, In My Head. We're in the studio today with Jackie Wilson from Empower Education, and we've been talking about the toolkit, Jackie, that you've been producing with your colleague Deborah, who's an amazing artist. So while that music was playing, you were giving me some an example of one of the toolkits, an amazing, lovely little bag with a selection of tools, stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stones in here.
Yeah.
Each of them illustrated by Deborah, and each one of them, I presume, relates to a feeling. Is it an emotion?
It relates to a tool that you can use to calm your emotion down.
Right.
So those are the tools that you actively do to calm yourself down. The feelings are on simple stones again, but with the faces on. So the faces of children, boys and girls.
Okay, so the facial expressions.
The facial expressions,
okay.
But that's a different kit.
Right. So describe for the listeners these stones I've got in front of me.
So each one's got a different tool on them. So we've got a cloud, which is just imagining your emotions on a cloud, or your thoughts it could be. So you can just, if you're feeling a bit angry, you could just look out the window or imagine that there's a cloud and just imagine your emotion just sitting there. And then you can use your breath to let it drift away. We've got the bee, which I've talked about earlier, which is just a very simple humming sound that we do in yoga. It's called Brahmari, to just settle you down. It can help with headaches. It's a very powerful tool, that one. We've got another one with the children, which is jumping. Jumping does something to children. It makes them feel light. It just kind of, it's a bit like the deer when they've run away from a lion and they shake. They kind of let out all that adrenaline, cortisol that's been flooding the body. With jumping, it's a similar thing. So jumping, actually, when I do it with my daughter, if she's in a mood, I used to use it with her when she was grumpy. If she's jumping, she starts laughing.
Really?
It just shifts her.
Right.
So for some children, that really works. And like I was just explaining to you, Elaine, that there's a lot of tools there, and they're meant for children to try, for adults to try, and to choose the one that resonates with them. So they don't have to do them all. It's choosing the one that you really feel works for you. And also to encourage them to open up their own imagination and come up with their own tools.
Yes. Yeah.
We kind of give our power away most of the time. That this mental health that we experience, we're classed as depressed, we're classed as anxious, but we've never been taught to hold on to that emotion, not hold on to it, but to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, recognise it,
that it's a feeling that we're passing through, and then decide how we're going to navigate through it. But we've not been taught that part, that navigating through. So rather than, for me, and I know so many people are medicated with their mental health, which sometimes is really necessary, but sometimes it isn't. If you just were taught very young how to understand what to do with that feeling and be able to work through it. And it's not just by doing these tours, there's other stuff that I do that helps people understand that. But we would have less need to be medicated in the future, for example, because we can't cope and we're having to give our power away to be able to cope with how we feel. And I just think if we can get this sort of teaching into schools at a young age, it's going to avoid more people suffering with mental health in the future.
Well, it's going to affect people on a generic health basis, because in the mentoring that I do for people with cancer, the biggest thing that stops them from healing is their emotions.
Yeah.
And when they're holding on to emotions that they've been carrying around with them for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they're not going to unravel those overnight. But a lot of people don't even recognise that they've got these emotions that they're holding on to, and until they release that, they're going to really struggle to heal. So it's a massive. So I can see this toolkit being used way, way wider than in the schools. It's amazing. I'll take my hat off to you,
oh,
Jackie.
Thank you.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think, in the future, what we want to do is to be able to create an adult toolkit. And again, you talked about collaboration earlier. It's really important for me. So that's why we're working with teens to create the teen toolkit. And I want to work with some particularly classed as mental health adults to be able to get them to help us create it. For me, that collaboration, seeing it from that side so that they can understand and I can understand, we can work together. I just think it's a much more powerful way to create these tools. I think if we can do it in collaboration with people who are struggling, then we can really get into their mind of how and what's going to help them.
Absolutely. While you're talking there, I'm thinking of the work that I've done over the years dealing with behavioural profiling. I use the DISC model of behavioural profiling that I'm sure you've come across. There's many tools out there, but I selected the DISC to work with 20 odd years ago because I can use it with students from the age of about 12, 14, right up to chief execs and everybody in between. And it's about understanding our behaviours and how our behaviour affects our success in life, our career progression, and latterly I've been looking at it in terms of health, because how we behave, some people are worriers where others are warriors,
Nice.
and you've got different aspects.
Yes.
So neither's right, neither's wrong, but they just are, and some people are natural worriers and they worry about the slightest little thing, and of course that can lead to extreme anxiety taken to sort of beyond normal sort of natural behaviours. So somebody who's over worrying would then lead almost by default to high anxiety and so on, and as you mentioned, medication, where somebody who's a worrier, which is nobody's going to tell me what to do and I'm the boss and I'm in control and all the rest of it, and again taken out of beyond normal realms, that can be high blood pressure, that can be road rage, that can be really nasty behaviour. If people recognise that behaviour and they know what to do with it, how to channel it, then I'm not saying don't have that behaviour, because it's perfectly natural. And if you are naturally predisposed to be this type of personality or that, don't ever try and change yourself, but understand yourself. And that's what I do with the DISC model, which and that's how I started 20 odd years ago in schools, because I'd been in corporate. I'd got at the time I'd got 200 and something staff, and I was seeing again and again what I call square pegs in round holes. So people who are, clearly in the wrong position. So by doing and I ended up being a business consultant for many years. So then using that tool to help reposition where people are in the organisation, doing some transformational stuff within the structure of the business. So you're not sacking people, you are realigning them into a position within the organisation where they are comfortable, they're using their strengths. Warriors are good at looking after accounts, for example. They worry about every penny and where it's going and what they're spending on. You need that. The warriors are more the leaders. But if the leaders, and very common in head teachers, I've profiled and I've mentored I don't know how many head teachers and business leaders over the years, and there is a pattern of behaviour that follows through. The warrior types, if they are unchecked, if they don't understand the emotional side of things and the emotional intelligence, if they're low in emotional intelligence, they will be doing a disservice to themselves, their family, their teams, and ultimately their health will suffer. Whereas if they are emotionally literate, shall we say, if they have high EQ, EI, then they will surround themselves with team members who've got the softer skills. And again, that's all part and parcel of teaching at a young age. And I used to teach teachers how to then express the behaviour, and I used to use animal pictures, which I still do. When I teach adults, I use the animal pictures. So there's quite a kind of a lot of synergy between what you're doing in terms of the emotions and what I've been doing over the years on and off with behaviour. And it's bleeding obvious, isn't it? It's all common sense, but we're not taught it.
Well, that's my biggest bugbear. We're not taught it. And I think for me, emotional intelligence is a passion that I teach children. I have programs that I teach young people in that, because for me, it's a missing subject. We're taught to add up, we're taught to read and write, but we're not taught how to learn about and understand ourselves. We're just not taught how to manage our emotions, how to manage our thoughts, to recognise, to see, to observe our thoughts. We're not taught that. But, you know, if once we start doing that, it's what's transformed my life from not doing that to doing that. I can get up every day and I can check in all the time. If I'm feeling something, if I'm thinking something, I've got it. And if it's not helpful, then I need to look at that. I need to think about, okay, why is that there? What am I going to do? What do I really want? And how am I going to shift my thinking to take me where I want to go, to help me feel different, to make sure I'm, you know, the actions that I'm taking are more supportive to what I want to do in the day, or you know how I want to be. So it's been such a transformation for me to come across that. And I wish I'd had this information when I was younger. I know that my life, because I've been through mental health myself, losing my uncle at 10, that really catapulted me into a downward spiral. But coming through that, I know just how important that would have been to me to have this knowledge. And it's common sense knowledge. It's just, once you show people, they're like, oh, so we've got a conscious, subconscious mind. We have this ability to kind of create new pathways in the brain, to change our thinking, to change, you know, there's so much we can do for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And avoid all the challenges.
We just need to be shown the way. And then, as you said earlier on with them, some of the students have actually created their own tools,
Yes.
you know, the butterfly, the feather, etc. Once you give somebody an idea, they can then go to their own imagination, their own internal references,
Exactly.
and then create something that's suitable for them, which in turn will also be shared and helpful for other people.
Yeah, definitely.
Collaborations again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. How exciting. So you're going to be changing the world. Well, you are bit by bit.
Yeah, with a collaborative group of people. Yeah, because I know in my heart I can't do this alone, and
It's too big,
yeah,
massive.
absolutely. And I meet so many amazing people, and I'm lucky that there are a lot of people I'm connected with that have the same sort of passion, coming from different angles. I was just meeting with an amazing lady yesterday who is a coach. She works with head teachers. Her passion is the top of the pile, the CEOs, the head teachers, whereas mine's the children. So we were just talking about how can we kind of look at how we can work together collaboratively to be able to kind of make sure that we can spread the word about what we're all doing. And there's more and more of us doing that. So I collaborated with another couple of people, an ex-head teacher and a teacher, to do the First Teachers Come First conference back earlier this year in March in Nottingham. And we're going to do another one next year. And again, that's to create a supportive community around the teaching profession for their own well-being, because I strongly believe that we've got to help our teachers first. They've got to help themselves first. So it's about educating them to help themselves first before they can pass that well-being on to the children. Because if they're struggling and stressed and not able to cope, but they're having to put all this well-being in for the children, there's a bit of a imbalance. And so they're getting ill, they're leaving the profession, or they're having a breakdown or whatever it is. They're not able to support those children wholly. And empathise with them and connect with them. It becomes as it has done, a fear-based culture education. And so children are getting shouted at, they've got a lot of pressure, all of that's going on in schools. And so the children can't thrive and they're not getting to their potential. So for me, if we can work with these teachers and educate them, so in set days that I do, I educate teachers in what I call self-education, so that they can feel a lot more empowered in their own lives, so that then when they get into that classroom, they've got a lot more awareness about themselves and how they're presenting and the energy they're bringing in the room, whether they're being conscious or whether they're coming from an autopilot place. And then that can then ripple down to the children. And you see it, I can see the effects of that. And so for me, it is about starting to create this big education. And as I say, I can't do it alone. Same with Positive Empowered Kids, the community for families that I've collaborated with, the very well-known Claire Clements and the Susan Brooks. Again, I can't do it alone. Let's come together as a collective with lots of professionals that are doing amazing things with kids and families, and let's showcase them. Let's all showcase what we do, and let families come, schools come and tap into that and find stuff for themselves that suits them. You know, I worked with a 13-year-old 3 years ago. She's left school now. And she was self-harming, she was suicidal, she tried twice, she'd been through the CAM system, and it just got worse for her. And her dad just happened to find me through my husband. And I said, you know, I'm not a therapist. I have trained in counselling, but I don't use it. And I spent 5 sessions educating her in herself. And she suddenly clicked that she could navigate, she could kind of take different perspectives. She could see that when people were being unkind, it was their stuff, it wasn't to do with her, unless she'd done something wrong. And then 3 years later, she's taken a GCSE, she's thriving now. She just needs a bit of education. And that got me thinking, there's not just me out there. What if I hadn't been right for her? So I'm all about, let's showcase people, let's bring people together, showcase each other, plus collaborate. Let's share knowledge and let's make things even more powerful for these families. So, you know, I'm a passionate collaborator.
Brilliant. That's a good description. Jackie Wilson, the passionate collaborator.
Maybe that's my title.
Yeah, very, very good, very good. You were saying about, we mentioned earlier on about warriors and warriors. Well, that young lady that you described clearly was in the more warrior camp,
yes.
because she would be taking on board things that people say do. It's her fault.
Yeah.
And this is so, I've seen this so often. When I give profile feedback to somebody who does a self-assessment, that's nothing that I do. They fill in a questionnaire, very simple, and I'm just working with a community trust at the moment to create one for mid-teens, so that it can help them. The language that's used in the adult one doesn't quite fit, so they've come up with a version and so on. So that's I'm dealing with that. Hopefully that will come out soon. So when somebody recognises that the behaviours of other people, it's their behaviours,
yes.
and effectively they're overreacting to other people's behaviours, and that person isn't behaving that way to have a go at you. They're behaving that way because that's who they are, and they'll behave that way to anybody and anybody until they are made aware that their behaviours are perhaps unkind.
Yeah.
So it's recognising all the different behavioural characteristics, which is, you know, why I got into behaviour years ago. Mm-hmm. I could recognise in myself that had I understood myself better, and the CEO that I was working, I was Chief Operating Officer. So had I understood my CEO better and myself and the staff that were under my in my team, under the various different directors, I would have been able to serve them better and myself better. But that was a huge wake-up call for me, and changed the direction of the rest of my life, basically. So we have these moments, and it's what we do with it, isn't it? And how we can use our actions rather than kind of going through life going near and bitter and resentful. Well, okay, well, what happened there? What can I do about it? How can I make that work? So that's the warriors bits and the emotional toolkit. I keep looking down at the stones at the kit here. We've got explain to me this one here. It's a picture of a tree with roots. So what would you expect a child to say when they pick that one up?
Well, so that one really that's more of a one-to-one tool. So it's thinking out who have you got around you that's your support system, because quite often we don't have knowledge of who's around us. So from a young age, if you start to learn who you've got around you that is your support, so it could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be an auntie, an uncle, it could be anybody, but that's your roots, they're holding you. And if you've got support around you, people to go to when you're struggling, you've got that support system there. It might be a toy, a favourite toy might be your part of your support system. It could be an animal. It doesn't matter. It's something. It could be that you do gymnastics or
something
you play
that roots
piano.
you.
Something that roots you and holds you, so that you can grow and be strong in the world and feel confident. And that's when you can start to blossom and flourish. So it's more. This is more of an activity of understanding your support system.
Brilliant. And the support system is so important. And again, Time and time again, I'm talking to people with the on the health mentoring side, which is my sort of emphasis these days. If you don't have a support system, create one. You have to, you are the one that has to take responsibility. And so many people are led by the nose by people who are well-meaning, but really don't have a clue about what you need. So rescuers, yeah, that's true. Yeah, there are rescuers. There's lots of rescuers, and fine, there's a place for them when we need them.
Yeah.
But when you're in a state of flux and you're vulnerable, that's the last thing really you need. You need somebody, a group of people, and they can be friends, they can be family, they could be people you've never met before. Anonymous phone lines and all the rest of it. There's so much support out there. At one level, but people need to take it. That you can offer all this stuff, but if people aren't ready to hear what you're saying and to take the next step, then hopefully by kind of sowing seeds and planting seeds and keep on saying the same thing, one day people go, oh, that woman keeps on banging on about that thing, and perhaps I'm ready now to have a go.
And that's why we need to start it off young.
Absolutely, they're hearing it.
You don't have to suffer on your own. There are people who will support you.
I get really cross about all this talk about mental health. Mental health, it's become a stigma in itself by trying to talk about it and not make it a stigma. It's now turned into this giant thing. And what really, really, really annoys me is there is not enough support out there. So people are now talking. I think society has created a bigger problem than before we spoke about it. Now people are talking openly. Where's the support? So you're leaving people. It's like opening a cut. It's an open wound.
Sure.
So we've got more people walking around that know they've got a problem but don't know which way to go. And to me, that's probably as bad as not realising they've got a problem.
Yeah, totally. For me, mental health. I don't often talk about mental health. I've kind of changed the word to mind health, like physical health.
Yes, that's a good phrase. I like that.
As a thing that we look to achieve, our physical health. But with mental health, it's like you say, it's got this stigma. But I've got good mental health. Other people have got poor mental health. We're on the scale.
Yes.
So if we think about it in terms of mind health, where is your mind health? And how can you move your mind health into a place that is thriving? Because you're never stuck. You're never stuck in a place. You have the capability of movement and flow, and it's just knowing to take that step. And you're not going to be able to move right up to good mental health straight away, but starting somewhere and taking that first step. But a lot of people get stuck in, and I see this. Once you're labelled depressed, anxious, or whatever it is, and maybe you're medicated, what I see is people stuck. I am this. And that doesn't enable you to move at all. When you start to change your words, just a little bit by saying, I feel depressed sometimes, I'm feeling anxious, that means that there's a possibility of change, that you could feel calm, that you could feel positive, that you could feel happy. And it's just trying to change that rather than encompassing you as a depressed person, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I think labels are helpful because you know what you're dealing with. But again, typical society, we've gone too far. The barometer has swung too far the other way. I do love the title you've suggested, Mind Health. I think that's fabulous. That is really, really good. I'm going to use that.
You can use that.
Yeah, I'm going to use that. Mind Health, as described by Jackie Wilson, the passionate collaborator.
Thanks.
There we go. How fantastic. And what you were saying about flow, it's also good to acknowledge that sometimes you don't have to flow. The flow can go the other way. You can actually, it's okay to step back. So if you're operating at 100 miles an hour, you've got all this pressure on you from whoever it is, friends, family, society, whatever, peer pressure, etc. So if you're you're going down a fast flowing river, every now and then it's okay to reach out, hang on to the branch, hang there,
like that.
Twiddle for a bit, and then when you're ready, you can then jump back in and off you go. By which time you've kind of recuperated, you recharge your batteries, done a bit of breathing, whatever it is, and then you're equipped to go on, rather than this fast flowing river that's just going to sweep you away.
I've got another analogy which I use quite a lot in my course when I'm doing inset days, when I'm doing with kids. I use the analogy of an aeroplane. So a lot of the time we're like an aeroplane in autopilot. There's no pilot there. It's going along. We can crash, we can fall, and we're done. That's it. We're there. But if we can put a pilot in our mind, this is where the observer, where mindfulness comes in. The observer is the pilot. So you can see where you're going, but you can also look behind. You can look into your aircraft. You can see what's right, what's not right. You can observe the thoughts that's going on. You can observe how you feel. You then have the choice that if you notice things aren't quite right, you can bring yourself down to land. You can just be on the runway. You could just rest. Take that breath, do what you need to do to recharge, to bring yourself into that place where you can take off into the world again and start to fly. This is going towards your potential that we all have in life. Every single person has a potential. And so for me, it's about how high can I go today? If I want to fly low or I want to stay on the ground, that's fine. But I do know I have the capability of spreading my wings and flying when I'm feeling in the right place to do that. You might need somebody helping you to, kind of your support to taxi you down the runway or whatever, but we do have that ability.
Brilliant. That reminds me of a company, a brand that I had. Well, it was a company as well, but a brand I had when I first started going into schools. So it was in the late 1990s, and I was living in a place. It was one of these new villages outside Harlow, between Harlow and Stansted Airport, called Church Langley. And at Church Langley, I think it's on the approach going into Harlow. There's a magnificent art installation, which is it's called Solo Flight, by a man called Antanas Brasdis. It's magnificent. It's a bit like the Angel of the North, but it's not the Angel of the North. But it's that kind of scale, and it sort of looks like that. And it's called Solo Flight, and I called my company and my brand Solo Flight, and because we're on our own, we are on our solo flight through life, aren't we? There's nobody else who's responsible for us except us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the aeroplane analogies carry on. Let's have a bit of Bob Marley. I feel quite invigorated and excited after that little. Let's Bob Marley. This is one of my all-time heroes, Bob Marley. Bless him. Here we go. Wonderful. One love. Bob Marley. We need more love in the world, don't we, Jackie?
Yes, absolutely.
More collaboration, more love around and about. So, how did you get into this? You mentioned that you had some mind health challenges when you were younger, and you wish that you'd had some guidance and support. But I'm guessing that you've probably had various different trainings. You mentioned you've been teaching yoga for 17 years. So with yoga, you're kind of in that world where it's all about mindful behaviours and relaxing and so on and so forth. So what else? I mean, have you ever had a real job? Have you had a career before you turned to this sort of way?
I trained in travel and tourism is what I trained in back in college all those years ago, and that was to do with. I worked for a tour operator for 5 years to begin with, and I did a bit more work after, tailor-making holidays to America. So that was, I absolutely loved it because I'm an adventurous type of person, and that for me was, I was helping people to feel great, to have a great time away, and I didn't realise that back then, that I was making a difference to their lives.
Yes, yeah.
And that kind of did something for me. But once I'd had my first 2 children, my mind health wasn't great at all. I'd been suffering since I was 10, should I say. When you suppress grief, it's not a great thing at all. It came out as anger, and later on it came out as a very depressed state. And so with 2 young children, I wasn't coping very well at all. And at that point, I kind of came into the world of yoga, and that helped me find moments of peace in my world. Didn't make a huge difference. I needed a lot more. So I carried on with my yoga. I ended up training and stepping out of the world of travel and tourism. I'd done quite a lot of other things that take too long to talk about, all the other little bits I'd done since I'd had my children. But they weren't particularly meaningful in terms of what I'm doing now. And then I trained as a kids yoga teacher, starting from 3 years old upwards, and I did that for years. And what I realised by teaching that is I was doing a lot of affirmations with kids, and it dawned on me about 8 years ago. I did a big life transformational course, a year-long course, and on that course I discovered that I had been projecting my own needs onto the children. So I needed self-worth. I had no self-belief. I didn't believe in myself at all. In fact, I thought I was a terrible person back then. I had a lot of self-hatred, but I was trying to encourage the children to feel good about themselves, even though I didn't. So I wasn't coming from a place of really understanding and experience what self-worth was like. And so I taught my yoga. I loved it. The kids were great. I didn't feel judged. Kids don't judge you, but I was very self-judging of myself. So there was all of this kind of inner critic stuff going off for me constantly. I took up counselling. I was counselled, and then I ended up training in basic counselling. I did child and adolescent counselling, but I never really practiced counselling. Never really went into that. I realise now why, because I'm more of an empowering type of person that wants people to find their own way rather than to sit, and which is, people need to talk about their emotional stuff sometimes, but other people just need a bit of education and empowerment to be able to move forward, and that's where I sit really well. But my year-long course basically helped me see myself and what I was creating, the dramas, my story, generationally. We did all sorts on that course, and I really had to come to terms with seeing life in a different way. My perceptions changed dramatically. I started to be able to piece together who I was, discovered my purpose, which was to educate, empower and inspire the next generation worldwide. I don't know how I'm going to do that yet, but I'm not going to think about that.
That's easy. That's easy. What you're doing with all the foundation, that can easily be put online. You'll be doing that back into next year. You watch. You will.
Thanks, Elaine. So for me, I knew that was my purpose, and so from then on I've done consistent work on myself to make sure I am in the right place to be able to do the work that I do. So if I'm having days that I need to just land and just really understand what's coming up for me, I'll do that, and I will work through things, because that's really important for me to be really observant and conscious about what's going on in my own inner world, so that I'm not bringing that into any of the work that I'm doing.
Brilliant. And as a result of that, you're an empath. You're able to empathise with people who are in the situation that you found yourself in, and you've got out of it, and you know how you can help people. It reminded me of what you were saying earlier on about you projecting your own feelings and lack of self-worth and et cetera, onto young people.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening when I was first working in schools as a consultant. I did some work in Hertfordshire with a pupil referral unit. Every single child that I worked with had strong behavioural characteristics, not dissimilar to myself. And I was a nightmare at school. If it wasn't for sports, I would have got slung out. As it was, I took myself out. I used to bunk off school, and even if I was school, that was in the gym or the trampoline or the swimming pool or on the sports field, whatever. But with the pupil referral unit, every single child I profiled, they had certain characteristics. And what was happening, the reason that they'd got slung out of school was because they would clash with the teacher, and the teacher would win, going back to the competitive style of behaviour.
Yeah.
So, and that's not fair. So I then got led into, I used to mentor people who'd got young teenagers who'd got criminal records, and then I'd help get them back on the straight and narrow. I was in the police for a while as well. My dad was a police inspector, so I'd got sort of experience on that side of the fence, and all the so I was doing the behaviour stuff many years ago. But it's all part and parcel. It's what you're doing now is helping people not to get in the state that I was helping people. So I was catching them before they got to adulthood and helping to straighten them out. But the damage had already been done in the early days by teachers telling them that they're rubbish and they're useless and this, that and the other, instead of looking at, okay, where are the skills, what is the passion for this child, let's harness that passion. Absolutely. Let's direct it and support, rather than the teacher try and stamp their personality on the whole class. I used to do in London. Gosh, all this memories flooding back. And I'd forgotten about all of this stuff. I used to do inset days for business in the community. And that's where I mentored head teachers. So I mentor the head teachers, I mentor the senior management teams. And then I was asked to put a day, education day together. So I was looking at, back in those days, brain gym was very new,
Yes.
and different learning styles and so on and so forth. And I brought behavioural profiling stuff into it. And it's amazing then. So in some ways it's sad, really. Nothing's really moved forward. So from what you're telling me to what I experienced 20 years ago, very little has changed.
No, well, it's the fear-based system that we live in. You know, it's teachers have been in education, they've gone through training, they've come back into education, and what they've witnessed and been taught is that you gain control over, and you do that by whatever means. And what I think we need to move into is a deeper understanding. Because if we can come, because we're in our heads so much of the time, and I think in the future what I'd love to see is more teachers coming from the heart and connecting and starting to get past the behaviour, because the behaviour is just a message. I'm struggling. I can't cope in the world right now. Let's get behind that. What are they feeling? What are they thinking? What's causing them to act in that way? Like we were talking about the thoughts and feelings, there's something behind it, but again, it's not in teacher training. In January I'm going to pilot in a teacher training at NTU, Nottingham Trent University, a 6-week programme to help them understand this for themselves. So experientially I'm going to take them through my 6 steps in my self-education programme, so that they can really get to grips with understanding what is beneath the surface of a child presenting, or an adult. It could be a colleague. You know, it's just to have this awareness of ourselves, what's going on for ourselves first, so that we can then connect to others. Because once you can understand a child is probably most likely having difficulty at home, they're coming from a damaged home life, or they may have, and maybe on top of, the biggest disease in humanity, which is I am not good enough, as Marissa Peer says.
Yeah.
Totally believe that. A lot of our problems with behaviour is because they don't feel good enough. Young 13-year-old, 10-year-old I worked with last year and still working with him. He was throwing chairs at the beginning of the year, angry as anything in year 6. Wouldn't access the classroom at all, labelled ADHD. And I took time. He didn't trust me at first, but I took time and I started to help him get to know himself. And eventually now, you know, by the end of July, before he broke up, he was able to do an A4 sheet of qualities and strengths that he possesses. He'd come to our festival in June, and he'd had a stall. You may have met him.
I did meet him, yes. I know who you're talking
selling
about.
Our
yes.
gemstones.
Yeah, excellent.
And he walked away in his pocket with a profit to himself of £50 that
Brilliant.
day.
That's amazing. For a young child
for a
his
young
age,
child
stunning.
who couldn't access the curriculum.
Yes, brilliant.
There is potential in every child, and they need to know that they are enough. I mean, my daughter, I was having this conversation with her the other day. She's 11. She says, "No, Mum, we're more than enough." Okay. So, you know, it's like we need children to really recognise that no matter what they're capable of achieving academically, they're enough.
Yeah, exactly. And not everybody can be academic.
No, they can't.
I wasn't academic.
I'm not.
Well, you are, because you've got the academic. What should we say? Well, the emotional side of things, emotional intelligence. It doesn't have to be academic. You know, we can't all be brain boxes.
No.
But it comes when you're ready. I mean, I did a master's degree. I didn't even have an A level. And I did a master's degree at Nottingham Business School when I was 40.
Right.
So, you know, anything can happen, but that was because of my life experience.
Yeah.
So we come to education sometimes through swatting and being very bright academically, sometimes through our experience and our knowledge and our thirst and passions and so on. But as you say, we are all enough. You mentioned 6 steps, this programme that you're going to be starting with NTU.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the six steps. What are they? How do they help?
Yeah, it's sort of like a formula I use in whether I'm teaching teenagers, I'm teaching, I do employability programs, I do teacher trainings, inset days. But for this, I see it as for self-education is what I call it. And it's this whole part of the curriculum that I feel is missing. So first step is self-awareness, being the observer of our mind. This is where the mindfulness part comes in. Really understanding the brain and the mind and how they're different but the same. And being able to know that there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can do. And if you can start to observe your thoughts, if you can start to notice and observe your feelings, you're the first step in this whole mind health arena. Then we move into the sort of mindset. I know they call it growth mindset quite often, but for me, it's about working with the mind effectively to catch that unconscious, subconscious stuff and to start to look at it consciously. What do you want? Where do you want to go? What do you want to be feeling? What thoughts are going to be helpful? So you're not limiting yourself. I was a shy kid and now I'm a keynote speaker. I've had to do a lot of work on navigating my thought process to be able to put me in front of hundreds of people. And it's that is crucial, understanding that sort of formula of how to navigate that, because we can choose our thoughts. They're automatic and we can't choose those ones that can be very critical, but we can notice them and we can decide if we're going to allow ourselves to believe it, and we can choose to change it.
It's the chatter that you were talking about earlier on again, isn't it? And practicing. So if we're picking ourselves up on our language, so if you're saying, like you were saying about the labels, I'm depressed. Well, you might say, well, instead of I'm depressed, I'd like to feel better, or you're turning your language around, aren't you?
Yeah. So I'd like to feel better. Okay, what would that be? What would you like to feel? Okay, I'd like to feel calm.
Yes.
Okay, so I am calm, you might say. Okay, so if you're feeling calm, that's when you've achieved it. You're feeling calm. What are you going to see yourself doing? Oh, I'm going to be doing this. So your mind starts to go into the imagination arena of what you could potentially do if you were feeling calm. And then how are you going to feel once you are calm? Okay, so I'm going to feel a bit happier. I'm going to feel more energy, whatever it might be. But you're starting to give them another way of looking at things so they can start to think out what it would be like and how they could get there. And then you can go into coaching and look at the little steps they can take to get there. And it might be the very smallest step, but it's a step rather than being stuck there. So that's the mind stuff. Then we go into resilience. So that's where the emotions toolkit was taken from. So the emotions toolkit feeds into that. Understanding what resilience is, but knowing that we have the capability to manage our emotions. We've looked at thoughts through the mind. We want to work on the emotions. So you're kind of tackling the awareness, the mind, the emotions, or the thoughts and then the emotions. And then you come into this self-worth arena. So self-esteem and self-confidence are 4 and 5, because there's a difference. You've got conditional self-worth, which is based on confidence in what you can do, your self-confidence. I can get an A star, so that means I'm good enough. No, what happens when you fail, when you get a C? And that happens so much in these private schools. When a child gets a B, and I've had these discussions, or not an A star, they just get an A, they're crushed.
My son has Asperger's syndrome. He's very, very, very bright. And he self-studied for 3 years because he recognised that people like him don't get job opportunities. So, I mean, I'm so proud of him. He self-studied. He was meant to go to college, but he wasn't comfortable in that environment, and also very often was cleverer than the tutor, and he'd get the tutor out of hot water sometimes. So he was self-studying, just pitching up to do the exams, and he was always getting in the 90s, always. And then one day he wasn't well, and he really didn't ought to have gone in for the exam, but he was so determined to do it. So took him along there, did the exam, and he only got 70-something, 76 or something like that. Anybody else would have been over the moon. He was absolutely gutted. He had a complete meltdown. He ran away. I mean, it was awful. Yeah. So it's
basing that self-worth on what you can do. Can be quite damaging because it's conditional.
Can be destroying.
Whereas unconditional self-worth is based on who you are. So if you know, and we all have these amazing strengths and qualities, these personality traits that make us who we are. And once we know that we're kind, we're caring, we're courageous, whatever those are, that's unconditional. It doesn't change. We may make mistakes, but it doesn't change the fact that we are worthy and valuable human beings, so that if we don't get those grades, we can step back into the fact that we are an incredible, extraordinary human being, and we can try again, and we can accept that failure as a place to learn from, as a gift of learning that can help us move forward. So that's the self-esteem and self-confidence that I think are really crucial, but you can't do that at the beginning. I do that at sort of towards the end, so that they've gone through the mind stuff, they've built their... And then the last thing is when we step into that social awareness, so how to work with little simple coaching techniques to be able to help them be more assertive and to manage conflict, and to connect and understand others have got a story. You don't know what their story is, so let's not jump in and blame and make life difficult for ourselves and for them. We don't want to create those conflicts. We want to try and see if we can understand the other person first, listen. All that sort of thing is really important. But if you haven't got an understanding of yourself, you can't do that.
Absolutely. So 6 steps. So you call those 6 steps to
self-education?
Self-education. Brilliant. Absolutely amazing. So it's been absolutely fascinating having you in the studio today, Jackie. Thank you so much for joining us. And how do people get hold of you?
So I've got websites galore, but I'll give you Empower Education. So it's www.empowereducation.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, if anybody's on LinkedIn, Jackie Wilson. I'm on Facebook, Emotions Toolkit, or Empower Education UK. And I'm on Twitter. I'm all over the place. But search Empower Education, Emotions Toolkit. There's Positively Empowered Kids or PEC Festival on Facebook, but we also have a Facebook website, and that's where we have networking groups for people who are interested in connecting. And we also have a festival in Nottingham, 28th of June next year, and we're also going to be having different networking groups and festivals around the country as well.
Fantastic. So Jackie Wilson from lots of things. Got confused. There's so many things. Empowered Education, empowereducation.co.uk. Thank you very much for joining us today.